Classical music mysteries. The great composers whose portraits hang on music room walls, they were called prodigies. They created sublime art, but they were absolutely not perfect human beings. In fact, by today's standards, they were just weird, eccentric older guys. Why did these legendary geniuses sometimes act more childish than actual children? Today, we're counting down their hidden, bizarre, and surprisingly playful daily antics. Stick around until the end. This might completely change the way you listen to their music. Let's kick things off with an incident that crosses all the lines. Number 5. The father of the symphony who cut off a friend's hair. Franz Joseph Haydn, known as the father of the symphony, left behind over 100 symphonic works. He was beloved and known as the mild-mannered Papa Haydn. But that wasn't always the case. As a boy, he was a massive prankster. The year was 1749. The place, Vienna. A 17-year-old Haydn was singing in the boys' choir at St. Stephen's Cathedral. During practice one day, he noticed the boy sitting right in front of him. The boy had a magnificent pigtail swaying back and forth. Most people would just look at it, but not young Haydn. He pulled out a brand new pair of scissors and he snipped that pigtail right off at the base. Why did he do it? I wanted to test how sharp my scissors were. That was his only reason. So what happened next? A furious teacher gave Haydn a severe beating. Since his voice was also breaking at the time, this incident became the final trigger. He was kicked out of the choir. Tossed out into the freezing November streets of Vienna without a penny, Haydn faced years of grueling struggle. He lived in a tiny attic. He busked with his violin on street corners just to survive. This rock-bottom experience started with a simple scissor prank, but some say this very hardship forged the relentless drive that eventually made him the father of the symphony. This story comes directly from Georg August Griesinger, a diplomat who befriended Haydn in his later years and heard it from the composer himself. That gives it a historical reliability of 3 stars. A small yet outrageously bold rebellion from the gentle father of the symphony. Doesn't it make him feel a little more relatable? Number 4. The grumpy Maestro who did handstands and obsessed over silk. Next up is some unbelievable behavior from a notoriously difficult master, Richard Wagner. When you hear his name, you probably think of grand, heavy operas and an arrogant, self-important personality. However, he supposedly had a hidden side that nobody knew about. Just imagine it, the stern-faced Wagner suddenly greeting you by doing a handstand in the middle of his room. You're probably thinking, there is no way that's true. But according to accounts from the 1840s to the 1860s, whenever Wagner was in a good mood, he acted like a child. He would suddenly climb trees, or he would do handstands indoors just to show off. Now, this record comes from the memoirs of his friend, Ferdinand Praeger. But historians and Wagner's own family have heavily criticized Praeger for embellishing and exaggerating facts. So the historical reliability here is just 1 star. Still, we can't completely dismiss it as fiction. Why? Because his wife, Cosima Wagner, also noted in her diary that he did handstands in front of the family. Also, this man who wrote incredibly dense operas based on Germanic myths had a massive obsession with silk. We actually have his letters to a Viennese tailor. In them, he detailed very specific orders for a pink silk gown and silk underwear covered in ribbons. The man who composed Twilight of the Gods, doing handstands in his room, draped in pink silk. Picture that. Doesn't the music of this deified maestro sound just a little bit different now? Number 3. A Less-Than-Pompous stink bomb. Now we're entering slightly dangerous territory. These aren't your everyday antics. Edward Elgar is the composer of the Pomp and Circumstance marches, often called Britain's second national anthem. With his magnificent mustache and perfectly tailored suits, he was the picture of a dignified British gentleman. But do you know what he did behind closed doors? He wasn't just obsessed with music, he was deeply addicted to chemistry experiments. The time was the early 20th century. At the absolute peak of his fame, Elgar built his very own chemistry lab right in his backyard. And one day, he caused a massive disaster. He was experimenting with hydrogen sulfide. He messed up the mixture. It didn't cause a giant explosion, but it was enough of a blast to scatter an overwhelming rotten egg stench all over the neighborhood, causing quite the uproar. Even more surprisingly, this wasn't just amateur tinkering. He actually invented something called the Elgar sulfuretted hydrogen apparatus. It was so practical that a professional company actually manufactured and sold it in 1908. You have to wonder why he applied his genius to something like that. This is entirely documented in Elgar's own letters and actual product catalogs. Reliability, 3 stars. Elgar was a man of many hobbies, from cycling and golf to science. Forget the stiff British gentleman. Picture him coughing in his backyard, having the time of his life with dangerous chemicals. It's an incredibly surprising look at a genius. Number 2, the Maverick who wore the same suit every day. All right, from here on out, the level of madness goes way up. Erik Satie was a French maverick best known for works like the Gymnopédies. His music was unique, but his lifestyle was far more extreme. Around 1895, Satie was completely broke. Then he suddenly inherited some money from a relative. Most people would buy a house, or at least eat a good meal. But Satie did something baffling. The moment he got the cash, he marched straight to a tailor. He ordered a suit made of chestnut-colored velvet. But he didn't just buy one, he bought multiple suits, all in the exact same cut and the exact same color. Why? To wear the same clothes every single day. From that day forward, he called himself the Velvet Gentleman. He rotated through those identical suits for years and years. This isn't just an urban legend. Satie lived in an apartment in Arkiel for about 27 years. During that entire time, absolutely no one was allowed inside. When he finally passed away, his friends went in to clean his room. They checked the closet, and records confirmed they found multiple identical velvet suits hanging there. But it gets crazier. His room was basically a hoarder's nightmare. Inside, they found a massive collection of completely unused umbrellas, some say over 100. They also found 2 grand pianos stacked bizarrely, one on top of the other. These details come from composer Darius Milhaud, who helped sort through Satie's belongings. Their reliability is a solid 3 stars. Steve Jobs famously wore the same outfit every day, but Satie was doing the exact same thing a whole century earlier. For Satie, that messy room and those velvet suits were his personal fortress of aesthetics, completely detached from the common sense of the outside world. Number 1. A secret night of dancing at the Conservatory. It's time for our number 1 spot. We've covered some interesting ground, but this final story is completely unexpected because it features a collaboration between 2 absolute giants. It easily takes the crown. Let me share an anecdote found in a historical memoir. France's Camille Saint-Saëns and Russia's Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky. When these 2 legendary composers met, a highly unusual scene supposedly unfolded. The year was 1875 in Moscow. Saint-Saëns was touring Russia when he met Tchaikovsky. They hit it off immediately. With deep mutual respect for each other's talents, the 2 men took the stage at the Moscow Conservatory one day in completely private company. What did they do? They performed an improvised pantomime mimicking a ballet. Saint-Saëns and Tchaikovsky dressed up as characters from Greek mythology and danced across the stage. The theme was Pygmalion and Galatea, and they danced to the piano accompaniment of Nikolai Rubinstein. Imagine it, a 40-year-old Saint-Saëns and a 35-year-old Tchaikovsky fully in character dancing innocently on stage. According to the records, Saint-Saëns played the female role of Galatea, while Tchaikovsky played Pygmalion. You might think, come on, that has to be made up, but this exact story is written in The Life of Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky, a biography penned by his own brother, Modest Tchaikovsky. However, from a modern historical perspective, scholars still debate how much of it is true or if it was heavily romanticized, so we give it a reliability of 2 stars. Still, these grand masters spent their days composing under immense pressure and fighting off critics. The idea that they just goofed around like little boys. This record perfectly captures their loneliness and the deeply human emotional shifts that came with it. Epilogue. Lovable Eccentrics. What did you think? Haydn cutting hair with scissors, Wagner obsessing over silk and doing handstands, Elgar's stench-filled explosions, Satie hoarding suits and umbrellas, and Saint-Saëns and Tchaikovsky dancing together on stage. The music they left behind is so beautiful, it feels like it was crafted by the gods. But they were also incredibly human. They were brimming with curiosity and loved throwing themselves into ridiculous games. The great world of classical music, it isn't a realm of untouchable gods in the clouds. It is the very lives of these lovable eccentrics who cried, laughed, and sometimes lost their minds, just like the rest of us. The next time you listen to their masterpieces, try to remember the playful, goofy faces hidden behind the notes. I guarantee it will sound like completely different music. Thank you for watching. If you have your own thoughts, theories, or interpretations, feel free to share them in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing for more content like this. See you in the next video.